Welcome back, everybody, to True Talk with TRUMOTION, where a couple of guys try to make the world a better place and hopefully make your day a little bit better in the process. My name is Mark, followed by my co-host, Steven. Let's get things kicked off. Well, we are just coming off of our fall 2023 martial arts tournament, and we want to kind of talk about that and the importance of having tournaments, the importance of competition, and kind of reflect a little bit more on our own tournament experience throughout our careers here. And then hopefully you can gain a little bit more of an understanding of why it is that we do tournaments and the importance of tournaments. So first off, I'm going to kind of kick it over to Steven and kind of let him talk to you about his tournament experience, his highs and lows of this tournament, and just kind of let him explain to you what he takes away from tournaments themselves. So, Steven, what give us a little bit about your tournament experience.
All right. Thank you. I had the opportunity to both participate as a performer or as being able to show off my form and spar, as well as being able to judge. And that's the second year I've done this, and that is really quite rewarding for me, because I get to see a little bit behind the scenes, but then I'm also just there to do my best as well. I definitely had a fantastic time at tournament. I told Academy, the other instructors, I told them, I had a great time. I was quote unquote flying. It felt like I was having so much fun. I was working with other great instructors, being able to help them judge, keep score in sparring rings, being able to just look at it and evaluate everything, and really that in turn helped me develop my own skills and continues to do so.
Yeah, you looked extremely loose that day, and typically when it comes to tournaments, people are a little bit more on edge in terms of like they're a little more tense because there's a lot on the line.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's not what you look like or put off at all.
And that's, now that you mentioned it, that's definitely how I felt. I had, after black belt kata, I had such a release of endorphins, kind of, because I'm like, I'm done.
Which, by the way, he took fourth in black belt kata. Obviously, he's probably not going to say that, so I'm going to say it for him. That's why he was feeling a little bit higher than normal. Is he really crushed it in that division, so he did great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but I guess it's out there. Yeah, it regardless of if I had placed or not, I felt just really good. I felt really good about participating, competing, and doing my best. Like, I felt proud. If I didn't place in sparring, I didn't expect to place in kata, but I did my best, and that made me feel good. That was my takeaway. I enjoyed watching everybody else compete and participate. I was very happily surprised with a lot of the placements, and I'm like, hey, that person did a good job. I got to see part of their form. I got to see a bit of the weapons forms too, and that was pretty intense. There were quite a few, from what I've seen, participants in the different weapons. Like a lot of the other individuals in the academy, they did a lot of different weapons, which I'm like, wow, they've participated in an earlier weapon, a sort of a initial or introductory weapon, and now they're participating in a more advanced weapon. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I agree. Overall, this past tournament was phenomenal. Truthfully, our Utah tournaments always go so smoothly. I've been to plenty of out-of-state tournaments in Vegas, LA, Orange County, Seattle, excuse me, all over the place, and they never run as smoothly as our tournaments. Our tournaments are just, I mean, we'll use the term that they're a well-oiled machine. I mean, you come in, you do your stuff, everything's announced right there in the ring. You move on to your next event, and if you're only doing 2 events, then you're done. The tournament itself can last anywhere from 30 minutes or less to an hour or more. I mean, it depends on how long you want to stay there. And yeah, it was great to see all these kids go there and compete. And what really kind of excites me as a judge, because I don't compete anymore, but what really excites me as a judge is when you see these younger kids and, man, they are petrified to do anything, and they muster the courage to come on up in front of you and do something. Whether or not they do the form they were supposed to do or not is irrelevant in my book, because the fact that they had enough courage to come on up, stand in front of you, and attempt to do something is huge. That is huge, because it's just setting a tone for the rest of that kid's life that they can conquer just about anything they want to. Now, granted, competing in tournaments isn't life-threatening or anything like that. You're not going to get hurt.
Unless it's black belt sparring.
Possibly.
Or white belt sparring.
It's really, honestly, and we'll tell him when the next time he's on the show, the only time you may possibly get hurt at tournament is if Master Lenton's judging your sparring ring. Okay? If he's judging your sparring ring, if there's no blood, there's no point. So, and we tease him about that all the time. But like injuries, we've never had injuries at the tournament, knock on wood. We'll just knock on the desk real quick. But they're run really, really well. And man, I just love seeing the kids just smiling from ear to ear when they're holding that trophy. And I always have to remind myself, because I'm going on, year 16, 17 with dealing with tournaments, that it's like, it may be like mundane and ordinary to you, but it is not to them. This could be their whole year. They could talk about this the rest of the year, being like, oh my gosh, do you remember when I competed at that karate tournament and I won first place in sparring? I need to always remind myself that this is not my tournament. This is their tournament. My job is to make sure they have the best tournament experience as possible. And I'll tell you, there's been times, and it was this time too, I don't know what it is, but like tournaments will keep me up at night because I'm worried about ruining somebody's tournament experience, because it matters that much to me that I want them to have a good experience, not necessarily win. I didn't say they have to win. They have to have a good experience, because you can never guarantee outcomes. You can only guarantee them showing up. Okay. So when it comes to tournaments, in my own personal experience, and I tell everybody this all the time, I competed in tournaments for years. I never won my first trophy until I was 10 years into competing. And it's like, everybody's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I always lost, but I always came back and I always did it again. They're like, really? And I was like, yeah, that's what you're going to do. I mean, it was kind of, when I was a student, I was really given no option to compete. It's like, you're competing. And I was like, well, I don't really want to. And they're like, well, I don't really care. You're competing. So it's like, okay, fine. Yeah, I would lose every single year. Every single year I'd lose. And it's like, this sucks. And I hated losing. I hate losing. And then finally I won like second and third place. And like, I think it was forms and like weapons or something. And I was like ecstatic. Like, you couldn't pry those trophies away from me. I'm like, get away from me. These are mine. So I understand when people are like, I'm afraid of losing. Well, you're going to lose if you don't show up anyways. So you might as well show up and try. Because I showed up and tried for 10 years and lost. And it's okay. And the crazy thing is I've seen far more talented athletically and just skill-wise instructors than me come and go. And the number one factor is I'm still here training. I'm still here teaching. They're not. So it doesn't matter how good or talented you think you are. It's, are you willing to show up every day and continue to try to compete? Okay. And that is probably the number one lesson, and the importance of tournament is teaching people how to compete. Okay. Competition, whether we like to admit it or not, is in every aspect of your life. Okay. When you get older, you're going to compete for jobs. When you're in high school and young adults, you compete for boyfriends and girlfriends. When you already have a job, you're competing for promotions. So whether you like to admit it or not, you are always in a state of competition. Now, back in the days, well, now we're talking like hundreds of years ago, you were competing for food. The best hunter got the best food. The best, farmer got the best food. It's one of those things we've lost the ability to know how to compete. Okay. Now, competing does not mean winning. A lot of people get those confused. Now, the goal of competing is to win, but you can never guarantee wins and losses. You can only guarantee your own efforts. So when you think of competition, you have to think in terms of, did I put my best performance or effort forward? And if the answer is yes, you did your job. Okay. Does that mean, hey, I did my best, that means I won? No, that's not true at all. That just means you did your best. The truth of the matter is sometimes someone else's best is better than yours. Okay. And like, have you ever experienced that where you've like done something, whether it be karate or not, you're like, dang, I am smoking this thing. I am on top of it. There's no way nobody else could do better than me. And then all of a sudden you lost. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, you bring up a really good observation, especially when it comes to what our students will be doing when they find a career. It's depending on where they go, it becomes a different kind of competition where it's like, okay, I'm gonna let's take for example a promotion. Let's take for example wanting to interview to get a raise. You prepare all you want. Maybe you just pull up your previous performances. Maybe you look at different statistics, different reviews, get people to write something nice about you, and you bring it to your boss and be like, hey, based on this, I want more money. I want this position. And you could just be right there. You could just say, no, we don't have that. You could just be told no. And regardless, that's not the outcome you wanted. That's not winning, but that's progress. So when it comes to competition, the outcome isn't determined, but what is determined is that you're progressing, you're getting better. So for me, what you just said kind of just struck me is showing up is progress. Showing up is making it so you're better than you were last time. You don't have to win. I mean, you kept showing up for 10 years and you didn't get a trophy.
Yeah.
But you kept progressing. Yeah. And so you have this sort of dichotomy of those who said, well, I'm here to win. I'm here to get my trophy. I'm here to get recognized as being the best. And they might be the best. They might be very talented. They might be very athletic. They might have quite the repertoire of different skills. They might have multiple backgrounds. But at the same time, are they progressing? Are they still coming with that mindset to be like, okay, I'm here to do my best. And if I win a small trophy, that's fine. But I'm progressing. I'm going forward regardless.
No, that's very true. And understand the difference between the two. By showing up, you want to the goal is to win. Okay. But again, we can't determine outcomes. You can only determine your own personal efforts. Okay. So your goal is to show up and win, but your goal is obviously to show up and give forth your best self, your best effort. I hate to try to use the word best effort because that sounds like all kindergarten, Sunday school type. Just show up and do your best and everything will work out. That's true and it's not true. Okay. You can't just have the mentality of like, well, if I show up, good things are going to happen. No, by showing up, you've given yourself the opportunity to make good things happen.
That's right.
Okay. So there's a huge difference between just showing up and showing up with intent. Okay. Because, I mean, let's take people in the workforce. You probably see people in the workforce all the time show up every day to work, but they're not high performers.
That's right.
And then you show people that show up to work with intent, and you're like, dang, these people are knocking it out of the park. But yeah, both people showed up today.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously the people that don't show up, and then you don't see them very often. Okay. So when it comes to competing, yeah, showing up is the first stage, but then you have to show up with intent. And the intent is to win, okay? But you can't guarantee outcomes. You can only guarantee your own personal efforts. And that's one thing that I really want to try to make sure that our students understand is you could show up with your best efforts and still lose. And it sucks. It sucks bad because you're like, oh my gosh, I worked so hard and I didn't win. Yeah, that's true. You did work really, really hard and I'm very proud of your efforts, but you didn't win. Then you have to ask yourself, was that the worst thing in the world that could have happened? Okay. When it comes to like a karate tournament, I mean, shoot, we're talking a plastic trophy that will end up on the mantle for a year or two, then it'll end up in a box. I mean, the lessons you learn from competing at the tournament will last far longer than the trophy itself. So when it comes to the students competing, do I want them to win? Yeah, I want them to win. Just as like one of their teachers, I want to see them do well. Like I never go to the tournament and be like, oh my gosh, I hope so-and-so loses hard. That would be the best thing ever. No, I want to be like, I want them to succeed. I want them to dominate everybody, but I can't do that for them. The only thing I can do is give them the skills and the time that it takes to progress, and hopefully they show up and they compete. Okay, so when it comes, and you've probably noticed this, the students that went and competed, their skill level has gotten better since they competed. Why? Because they were pushed to another level by the people that were at the tournament. So everybody always asks me, like, oh, how can I increase my skill level? How can I increase my skill level? Well, you got to compete. Okay. And tournaments, Steve and I were actually talking about this last night after class. We were talking about tournaments and the importance of them and how people sometimes underestimate the importance of tournaments. Training, we all go through this period in our training where we're like, man, I just hope one of these days I'm walking to my car and someone just tries to start something with me. I hope there's an attempted mugging on my way to my car. Then I could just beat the crap out of everybody. We all go through that weird phase in our training where we're like, I want to show what I've got. And then you get older and you're like, God, I hope nobody ever tries to attack me. I don't, So we always have this weird phase in our training where we want to be able to gauge our own skill level or demonstrate the skills that we have. Well, that's what tournaments are for. Okay. Coming to class is like practicing for a sport. Okay. So if you've ever played a sport, you always have practice. That's what coming to class is. Coming to class is practice. Tournaments are games. That's the chance to take what you've learned in practice and actually use it outside of practice. Plus, most of the time, like parents don't stay and watch because it distracts the kids. But that's a chance for your parents to see your own personal skill level. But yet, a lot of times we get a lot of people that are timid and shy and scared to compete. And I understand being timid and shy and scared, but that's something that we all have to work on learning to overcome. Okay. And I know from personal experience, and Stephen, you could probably talk about a story too about own personal experience where we've been encountered with something that scares us or intimidates us or makes us nervous. And we've done two things. We've either run and hid from it, or we've confronted it and conquered it. Okay, I know I've been encountered with both. And one time, and you still always remember it, you're like, it was, it was probably about maybe 12 years ago. My knee had been hurting. It'd been hurting, but it hadn't been hurting that bad. Like I was able to move around and stuff like that. And they asked me, hey, do you want to compete in the instructor's division? And I said no because my quote unquote knee was hurting too bad. The truth of the matter is I didn't feel prepared enough and I didn't want to look silly. Which in reality, I should have gone up there, done my best. And if I looked silly, that's my own personal fault because I didn't take the time to make sure I was ready enough to compete. So that's been something that's always nagged on me. And that's 12 years later to where you're like, God, I should have gone out there and competed. Like, what was the worst that would have happened? And then it makes you look bad in, you know, the eyes of your peers and all this and that stuff. And then there's been times where it's like, I could barely walk and they're like, hey, you going to get out there? And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to look the best, but I'm going to do it. And they're like, all right, let's see it. And you don't win anything, but the fact that you got out there and you did something was worth it. Have you ever experienced like those scenarios where you're like, you're presented with either fight or flight effectively?
Yeah. So I don't know if I have a scenario as specific as that, but yeah, every time that I've run into something that I've bowed out of, that I'm like, I can't do this, I've regretted it. It's like I should participate. I should compete in everything I do. And I guess it's more of, I'm not going to say it's like I missed out. No, ultimately.
No, exactly. Yeah, you missed out on something.
And now I have this thing of like, okay. And it can get pretty crazy, because when I had paid time off or sick leave, I would be like, well, am I really sick enough to use this? And it's like, I don't want to miss out. I want to get stuff done. And that's kind of been infectious for me, that just recently on my trip, when I talked about on our previous episodes about rappelling or hiking, that's something that's insanely out of my comfort zone. Like, I've never hiked that long before. I've done a whole day hike, but I've never gone at that pace. I've never stayed up and actually been sort of the pack leader. I've always been someone who's trailed behind, because it's just so much more effort for me. And then when it comes to like rappelling, it was just something I said, I can't miss out on this. And when I participated and when I did this activity, I felt really, really good. So every time it's like, just do it. Honestly, just get it done.
No, it's very, very true. I mean, every time you bow out of doing something that, whether it be one, scary, or two, intimidating, or whatever, you just don't want to do it, you're giving up on an opportunity to either, one, gain experience, two, have a great story to tell later on. Because I can't tell you how many times you're like, I don't want to do something, and then you do it, and you talk about it constantly afterwards. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the tournaments. The kids and the adults, whether they win or lose, they talk about the tournament the rest of the time. I mean, let's take adults. How many adults, and let's say in a professional environment, how many adults can go back to the office and be like, yeah, I just competed in a karate tournament? And everybody looks at them like, what? They're like, yeah, I just took first place in my sparring division for my age and rank. A lot of people will look at you and be like, you mean the adults can do karate? And the answer is always yes. And a lot of people will be like, really? I didn't even know you were into that. Or they have they have these stunned expressions on their face because they've never done anything like that. They've never put themselves out there to compete in something like that. Plus, there's not very many opportunities for adults to do stuff like that anymore. I mean, yeah, there's like the men's leagues, like athletic stuff, and, you know, same thing for women. They got their women's leagues and all that. But like, how many former dancers have the ability to compete in another dance competition after they graduate? I can't think of any. But yet, as an adult, you can compete in this martial art. And the fact that you're still putting yourself out there to compete, man, that's huge. That is so huge, because you see people change, especially adults. Adults, they'll come in with very rigid thinking and thought processes, thinking that they know the best, which sometimes they do. But yet the thing that really kind of makes me laugh or gives me, joy is when you see them start to change and be like, God, I don't really know that as much as I thought I did. And they're open to listening more. And you see them mentally change and physically change at the same time. And that all comes through them getting their butt kicked while competing, losing, having an honest conversation with themselves by looking in the mirror and be like, that sucked. I wish that didn't happen. And then you're like, I don't want that to happen again. So I either need to, listen to my instructor more and realize my way isn't as good as what they're telling me, or 2, I need to try harder. And it's really fun to watch adults go through that kind of metamorphosis or process where it's like, yeah, you're good, but you're not that good. And that's okay. Why? 'Cause you got the rest of your life to get better. I mean, our motto is building better people. It's like you don't come to us because you're a great person. Sometimes you come to us and you really are a good person. That's awesome. Hopefully we can make you a better person. Nobody comes to us. I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people actually come here that are quote unquote bad people or bad kids. None of them are bad kids or bad people. They just need a little bit of help. Okay. And that's where things like tournaments, things like our events, our retreats, our Shaolin Training Day, our All-Star Weekend, our TruMotion trips, all these events are ways to put themselves out there, 1, to meet new people, and 2, to compete. Okay, so remember, one of the biggest things to take away from competing is to show up with intent. If you don't show up with intent, well, that's like going through life without goals. Okay, you have to know where you're going. Showing up is the first battle. Okay, but now you got to show up and you're like, my goal is to take first place. That's your goal. Okay, that's your intent. Then you got to show up with your efforts. Okay, so first step is show up. Got to show up. You can't win if you don't show up. Just like every answer is no unless you ask. Same thing with competing. You lose every time you don't compete. Okay. In fact, we have a quote in the bathroom by Kobe Bryant. I'm gonna do my best to remember it, but it says, every time you quit, your competition gets better. So every time you don't do that one last kick or that one last rep or that one last push-up or that one last technique, well, somebody else is doing it and they're getting better. Okay, same thing with going to tournaments. Every tournament you don't compete in, the person that does is getting better. Not just physically wise and skill wise, but I would dare say emotionally, mentally, spiritually, everything under the sun, they're getting better at. Is that something that you've kind of seen just like through, like, I can't remember how many tournaments you've done so far. You've done a handful, that's for sure. But have you seen the difference between you that has competed in all the tournaments and the ones that really haven't been competing in tournaments? Because I have.
Yeah, that's exactly tournaments. I was thinking today, and don't know if I should be allowed to do that, but I think tournaments like a multivitamin. It's like you need it regularly. You need competition. You need some competition as a part of like your nourishment for your soul.
Yeah, that's the only way that you inevitably get better.
Yeah,
because you need that person pushing you.
Think about like we mentioned, playing sports. Think about maybe more of a low energy hobby. Think about maybe learning a musical instrument. You can be incredible. You can be the undiscovered talent. But do you know how you get discovered? By competing. By giving it your effort. So it's like you could play the piano and be the world's, you could be God's gift to man with a piano. But if you don't compete, no one's going to know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you don't put yourself out there, the only person that'll know is you.
And you might not even know.
That's true. Yeah, that is true also. So really what we're really trying to get across to everybody today is don't be scared to put yourself out there and compete. Okay, if you're worried about losing, you're going to lose. Just accept the fact, okay? Nobody will go undefeated at everything all the time, okay? You might go through streaks of not losing and dominating all the time, but life will always have the way of kicking you on your butt, okay? So don't not do something because you're afraid of losing. And that's a really hard thing to kind of understand, because fear will prevent us from doing a lot of stuff. Fear is another topic that we could go on and on about all day, but we'll keep it about competition. So again, the moral of the story, put yourself out there and compete. Try, fail, win, do all that. Because ultimately the person that gets better is you. But you can't get better unless you put yourself out there. Okay? So that's what we wanted to try to talk about today, is our kind of takeaway from the tournaments, the reason why we do tournaments, the importance of competing, and hopefully it gives everybody a little bit better insight of why we do stuff that way. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be having more guests on the show. My goal is to wrangle in Master Martin for an interview here in the next couple of weeks, so make sure you look out and listen for those. But if you have any questions or comments or things you would like us to talk about, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. But we appreciate you, everybody, coming on out, spending their time listening to us. Hopefully we said something that sparked something that, causes change. And hopefully we, also, like we said, make your day a better day and make the world a better place.
Yeah, feel free to share your own experiences with competition.
Exactly.
In the comments below. Did it go well for you? Did it not?
Absolutely. But again, thank you for tuning in, and make sure you kick it back with us next time.
Yeah, kick it with us next time. Bye.